calmly admitting he was the boy torturer the newspapers had warned every mother about. He wasn't finished yet. Jesse Harding Pomeroy was born on November 29, 1859, in Charlestown, Massachusetts, the second child of Thomas Jesse Pomeroy, a butcher and Civil War veteran, and Ruth Ann Snowman, a seamstress. Illness in his first 6 months left him with a deformed right eye, one without a visible pupil or iris, a mark other children noticed and mocked. At home, his father drank. He beat Jesse regularly, sometimes stripping him naked first. His mother loved him. His father terrorized him. Between those two facts, a strange child grew up mostly alone. Pomeroy preferred solitary pursuits to the company of other boys. He suffered headaches, vertigo, seizure-like episodes, moods that swung without warning. Once, his mother brought home a pair of lovebirds. She later found them with their heads twisted off. By 1871, that same isolation had curdled into something the neighborhood would soon fear. Over the following year and into the fall of 1872, Pomeroy carried out at least 9 attacks on younger children, all boys, all between 4 and 10 years old, all from the Charlestown area. His method rarely varied. He lured a child somewhere empty, an abandoned outhouse, a stretch of marsh, a vacant boathouse, then overpowered him, stripped him, bound him, and stuffed a handkerchief into his mouth. Then came the beating, done with sticks or rope, sometimes accompanied by Pomeroy masturbating in front of his bound victim. Tracy Hayden, 7, was beaten and abandoned on Powder Horn Hill on February 21, 1872. Robert Meyer, 8, was left in a Chelsea outhouse on May 20. Johnny Balch was found tied and beaten in another outhouse on Powder Horn Hill on July 22. The Boston Globe took notice, writing that the public are considerably excited over a fiendish boy attacking younger children, though no one yet knew his name. The family moved to South Boston that August, Thomas Pomeroy having by then abandoned them entirely. The attacks followed. George Pratt, 7, was found beaten by fishermen on August 17. Joseph Kennedy, 7, was lured to a vacant boathouse on September 11 and cut with a pocket knife. Robert Gould, 5, was found tied to a telegraph post along the Hartford and Erie line on September 17, beaten and slashed. It was Kennedy who ended it, for now. Walking past South Boston's police station 6 sometime after his own attack, Pomeroy stopped to look through the window. Kennedy was inside, and he recognized the face staring back at him. He pointed. Officers arrested Pomeroy on the spot, and he confessed immediately, without resistance, identifying himself by the name the papers had already given him. There was, in a sense, no investigation left to run. Pomeroy told police what he'd done almost as soon as they asked. The surviving victims, Hayden, Meyer, Balch, Pratt, Kennedy, Gould, were brought forward one by one, and each identified him as the boy who had hurt them. On September 21, 1872, he stood before juvenile court Judge William G. Forsyth, confessed again, and was sentenced to 6 years at the State Reform School for Boys in Westboro. He was 12 years old. The system, having gotten its confession and its conviction, treated the matter as closed. Pomeroy served less than 2 years of that 6-year sentence. In February 1874, at 14, he was paroled back to his mother, who had since opened a dressmaking shop in South Boston, and to his brother Charles, who sold newspapers on the street. What the reform school had not done, could not do, apparently, was change what was underneath. In March 1874, a 10-year-old girl named Katie Curran disappeared from South Boston. No body, no clear trail. Then, on April 22, 1874, the mutilated body of 4-year-old Horace Millen was discovered in the marsh of Dorchester Bay. Detectives went to Pomeroy immediately. They had no evidence tying him to Millen's death, nothing beyond the fact that a boy who had done this kind of thing before was walking free in the same neighborhood where it had happened again. He was taken to view the body directly and asked, to his face, whether he had done it. The answer to Katie Curran's disappearance turned up somewhere closer to home than anyone expected. Her body was eventually found in the basement of Pomeroy's mother's own dress shop, buried in an ash heap, concealed without much care or effort, as if whoever put her there hadn't expected anyone to look, or hadn't much cared if they did. At the coroner's inquest that followed, Pomeroy was denied the right to counsel. Whatever due process might have offered him, it did not offer him that. What makes the Millen case difficult to sit with isn't a hidden culprit or a last-minute reversal. It's the opposite. The evidence against Pomeroy for Millen's murder was thin enough that police went to him first simply because of who he already was, not because anything at the crime scene pointed to him. A boy convicted at 12 for torturing other children became, at 14, an automatic suspect for something far worse, before a single fact connected him to the marsh where Horace Millen's body was found. The case brought against him, Commonwealth v. Pomeroy, went before the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court on December 9 and 10, 1874. The Attorney General pushed for a verdict of murder in the first degree, then, in closing arguments, offered the jury an alternative path: murder committed with extreme atrocity, still first degree under Massachusetts law, but without the requirement of proving premeditation. It was a hedge built into the closing argument itself: proceed on the strongest theory, but leave the jury a door if the strongest theory doesn't hold. On December 10, 1874, the jury found him guilty. They also did something unusual: they attached a recommendation for mercy on account of his age. He was 15. His attorney, Charles Robinson, filed exceptions that were overruled by February 1875, and Pomeroy was sentenced to death by hanging, making him, when the conviction had been entered, the youngest person in the history of Massachusetts ever convicted of first-degree murder. Then the machinery of the state simply stopped moving. Governor William Gaston would not sign the death warrant. Twice, the governor's council voted to uphold the execution, and twice Gaston refused to put his signature to it. For a year and a half, Pomeroy sat under a death sentence that no one with the legal authority to carry it out was willing to enforce. The refusal wasn't explained by any confession, any new evidence, any doubt about guilt raised in the record. It was simply a man in power who would not do it. In August 1876, the Governor's Council voted a third time, this time by secret ballot, and commuted Pomeroy's sentence to life in solitary confinement. On the evening of September 7, 1876, he was moved from the Suffolk County Jail to the state prison at Charlestown. He was 16 years and 9 months old, and he would spend decades alone in a cell. He did not spend that time idle. Pomeroy claimed to have taught himself to read several foreign languages, including Hebrew, and one visiting psychiatrist confirmed he'd learned German with real accuracy. He wrote poetry and fought prison officials for the right to publish it. He studied law books and spent years drafting his own legal challenges and pardon requests. A 1914 psychiatric report, later quoted at length by the Boston Globe, counted 10 or 12 determined escape attempts, and noted that handmade tools kept turning up in his cell: rope, steel pens, a drill, once a gas pipe he'd tried to redirect to destroy a wall, an attempt that cost him one of his eyes. In 1917, with District Attorney Joseph Pellet's support, his sentence was modified enough to grant him the ordinary privileges of a life prisoner. He resisted the change at first. He wanted a pardon, nothing less, but eventually settled into it, even appearing in a minstrel show staged at the prison. By 1929 he was an old man in poor health, and he was transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for the criminally insane. He died there on September 29, 1932, 72 years old, having spent almost 60 of those years behind a cell door he'd spent much of that time quietly trying to take apart.